And we're back.
Welcome to wow, rough start. Welcome to episode 254 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Now, Param, you start every episode by reminding people that we're back, but we are back in more ways than one in this episode. We're back to the Mwangi Expanse.
Woohoo!
This is the first time we've looked at a hardcover twice, 2 episodes in a row, but we really felt this episode deserved it because as exciting as last episode was, where we covered the lore and we talked about just the historical impact of the book itself, we didn't have time to also talk about some of the cool new mechanics that were introduced into the book. Now, some people have actually been critiquing this book for its lack of crunch, but that's not a reflection of the quality of the new rules and options that are presented in the book. If anything, it highlights how good the new game material is because people want more. So here to talk about the new mechanics in Lost Omens, the Mwangi Expanse, are 2 of the authors, Michelle Jones. Hello, Michelle.
Hello.
And Nate Wright. Hi, Nate.
Hello.
We are happy to have you both on the podcast for the first time. So before we get into the book, I'd like to get to know both of you a little bit more. Now, I know both of you have strong feelings about Nintendo. We're not going to get into that in the podcast, but this was a lively pre-show conversation that I appreciated quite a bit. So thank you for that. So let's talk about how you got into gaming, Nintendo aside, how you got into Pathfinder, and then eventually how you got into freelancing for Pathfinder. So starting with you, Michelle, what was your first step into the world of tabletop gaming?
So it actually started on social media. I was sort of friends with a certain game designer on social media. I'm not going to name drop because that would be very gauche. But I was just complaining. I was like, oh, I want to play RPG so bad, but they're also expensive. I can't spend $60 for a rule book. And they were just like, hey, do you know all the Pathfinder rule books are online for free? And I was like, really? That's cool. So I started playing Pathfinder and talking about Pathfinder. And then they were like, hey, you have a lot of opinions about Pathfinder. Do you want to write for Pathfinder? And I was like, yeah, obviously. And yeah, I've just been going that way ever since.
That's a new one, that you first got into role-playing games through social media. It's reminding me that every generation has its own template for their story, and that when I first got into role-playing games, the idea that somebody got into it through social media, not really an option.
I also love that this is like the best justification for the SRDs existing, and Paizo's choice to make the game as open as they have. It's like it's led directly to having a fantastic author working on the game.
Yeah, and it is something that I appreciate so much. Like, I feel like other games are going in that direction, kind of, but then like the SRDs are always like, this is the base version, or like, here's some of it, and if you pay, you get the rest of it. But with Pathfinder, it's just like, no, here's the game. Here you go. If you decide to pay for it, if you want to buy the books, there's some really great art in there. They're very nice to have on your shelf, but like, we're just going to give it to you.
Including the content you worked on.
That's right.
Just going to give a shout out to the Archives of Nethys, since because they are a licensed partner, they can even include the lore of Pathfinder. They can include the stuff that is Paizo owned IP. So they're not just sharing the rules; they're sharing the whole thing.
It's even more than that. They're now the official SRD. They're the one, the sanctioned one, the chosen one.
Now, Michelle, did you get into Pathfinder First Edition, or did you start with the new edition?
I started with First Edition. It was a little later in First Edition. I think. So the first thing that I ever wrote was a bestiary entry for the back of Thrushmore Terror. So that's so Strange Aeons is about when I was first getting introduced to Pathfinder.
And then we've also got Nate Wright. Nate, how did you first get into Pathfinder?
I started with a lot of people, 3rd edition of D&D, played that in high school and some local game stores. I first discovered the idea of an online community with some of the more infamous forums out there. But eventually I stumbled upon Pathfinder Society at a convention, played the playtest, or not playtest, but the pre-gen Gunslinger, And despite that, I stayed with the game. And then I played the Summoner class, which is the coolest class ever, and instantly fell in love with Pathfinder. APG Summoner is a perfect, beautiful child, by the way. I will not tolerate slander of my precious child. But after that, well, in my local area, there's a pretty big scene, and we have a convention called SkullCon, which is pretty great. Thurston Hillman came by, actually. Great guy. And I talked to him, kind of worked up the courage, asked if he was looking for new blood. He put me in touch with some people at Legendary Games who gave me my first shot at a small thing. And then he came to me with an offer for a Starfinder Society quest. And from there, I've been doing the occasional small gig for Viso, and it's been pretty great.
Now let's talk about getting on the Mwangi Expanse specifically. This is a book that Luis and Eleanor, the developers of the Lost Omens line, had a lot of big plans for. So how did they get in touch with you, and how did that conversation go? We'll start with Nate.
Mine was pretty simple, actually. They just said, hey, we're looking for people for this book. And I said, work as a freelancer? Yes, please. And yeah, feel pretty lucky that they asked for me to be on the book.
How about you, Michelle? About the same?
Well, I've done a few books with Louis and Eleanor, because I think they were, before Lost Omens, I think they did a lot of the player companion line. I think, if I remember correctly, I think Heroes of Galarian I worked on with them, and it might have been one or two other books before that. So Heroes of Galarian was I believe, the last player companion to come out for first edition. And so for a long time, I just wasn't writing, because that was the end of first edition. And then when they started doing the Lost Omens books, they were like, hey, do you want to get in on these as well? And so I was reintroduced to I was introduced to second edition writing for Lost Omens Legends. And from there, I've been on a couple of Lost Omens projects.
Do you want to just give a couple of shout outs to some of the projects you've been on?
I have to check.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to put pressure on you
know
then.
which ones are. I don't know which ones are public at this point. It's sort of, that's kind of how it goes. You write things like a year before they get announced, and so yeah, I know Legends, Mwangi Expanse.
Who'd you write for Legends?
Yeah, I wrote Geb.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think the other ones are all TBA, so I'll have to get back to you.
Okay. Then we will not push you for any further information. We don't want to get you in trouble. So looking at the Mwangi Expanse, we are going to start with looking at the new ancestries because of the new material, the new crunch that was announced. The ancestries are some of the most curious as far as, if there was a template for options. What the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse did with ancestries was as far from the templated ancestry that you can imagine, when the most familiar ancestries in the book are the Gripply and the Knoll. You know that they've definitely gone pretty far off base. No, not off base. That's a bad one. Anyway, it's pretty far from expectations, which is not a bad thing at all. These are some amazing ancestries. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones that I know Param had your eye was the Anati.
Yes!
Nate is the writer for, so Param, why don't you tell him how much you love your little spider dancing folk?
Ever since I very first saw the picture of Spider Boyfriend in Ultimate Wilderness, I was like, I must play an Anati. I absolutely must play an Anati. And I got the chance to during one of their actual plays. And then I kind of went through an emotional roller coaster when second edition started to try and change my wonderful Anati into something else. And then thank you for bringing them back into the wonderful Anati I always wanted them to be, Nate. You've done awesome.
Thank you. I had fun writing them, actually. I really do love writing the unusual stuff. Like, anytime I play a game, I try to dive for anything further than the Tolkien Hall of Famers, as it were. And when I saw an opportunity to write these people who are also spiders, I was giggling to myself as I told the people at Paizo, yes, this please give.
What were some of the challenges of writing the adorable spider people?
Definitely the biggest one is the fact that player characters and NPCs and monsters operate under completely different rules. So it was a blessing, though, because I could look at their bestiary entries, which were faithfully recreated in the book, as a guideline. Like, okay, these are the things they can do. And if someone's making an Anati, they might say, oh, I want to make my own Anati. Or they might say, oh, I kind of see this as an iconic Anati. How do I get these abilities? I want to do these things that I see in the other book. So I definitely tried to make it so you could be exactly these things if you wanted to build that way.
One of the themes going through the new ancestries is other people treat you like monsters, and so the Ancestry Society has reacted like this. Was that like a goal of everyone working on the Ancestry section, or was it just like parallel design?
That's just kind of what I saw reading in the lore, like the direction I got, and just a few words of advice from my handlers. So I tried to go along with that theme. I mean, I like kind of darker stuff, more sinister stuff. So kind of toning that down, my inner World of Darkness player saying, no, you should make a variant where they're like super evil or vengeful. And it's like, I got to stay on theme. I don't want to break. I don't want to break the lore just because I can tap into my inner edgy teenager.
Yeah, these are the opposite of that. These are almost Skittermanders in how wholesome they are.
Oh, absolutely. They just want to be everybody's friends. They just want to like get along with everyone. I like to write. One of my favorite things that I wrote for it was the reassuring presence reaction. So you could have an emotional support spider. Like just take this thing that people are usually afraid of, but he's so nice and cuddly that your tensions are eased. It's the opposite of arachnophobia.
Like they make the perfect diplomats.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to like have someone with the mindset of, okay, how can I minimize trouble? How can I stop the violence? How can everybody just be friends? And once I got in that mindset, it definitely helped just think about their mentality and how they treat people. And it also helps that they had some pretty solid lore in previous books to like build upon as well.
Now, I mentioned that the Anati kind of went through a brief transformation at the beginning of second edition when, like, up until the beginning of second edition, Anati existed, but they didn't have like official player stats or anything. And then they show up in not Second Darkness, in Age of Ashes, the first book of Age of Ashes, and they do not look like cute spider boyfriend anymore. They're this large anthropomorphic Anati with like pinchy claws, and they don't look. They're not peacock spiders anymore. And now with your write up, they are back to being peacock spiders, except for if they take a feat. So like, was that part of the draft, the marching orders, or how did that come around with getting Anati to where they are now, as opposed to the two different directions they seemed to go in earlier?
I mean, part of that was kind of me looking over, like, how could I write them as a player race? And it seemed a little difficult to add the three forms, all of the abilities. And I just tried to think, how can I make this work? Especially since the hybrid form was essentially the best of both worlds. So it seemed the most likely to, maybe that one should be an option. And considering the spirit of the bestiary for second edition, which a lot of it was, hey, you thought you knew these monsters, but maybe they work a bit different now that you've done more research. And I kind of figured, like, okay, so you had bestiary entries before, but now it's the perspective of the Anati. It's playable. You are Anati looking at direct Anati lore. Maybe the hybrid form was tied to the legends they had back when people thought they were like some kind of arachnid lycanthrope. Maybe I didn't portray that well enough in the writing, but that's kind of where my mind was when I was working through it.
We are not taking any self-beaten up talk on this podcast. All right? We love the Anati. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the Anati have they have I lost my place in my book here.
I want to talk about friend form.
Yeah, sorry. Friend form. Talk about friend form.
I just love the idea that it's like, I like you enough that you could be me for a while.
Oh yeah, that was definitely another one I thought of in the whole, all right, they're very communal, they work with groups. how could I write mechanics that add to the flavor of adventuring and naughty are kind of going to see a lot of parties as they're like, I don't want to say surrogate web marriages because not every party is a romantic thing, obviously, but that kind of just idea of people being bonded together. And I think this is just a way to express that bond where it's like, okay, you can trust someone enough that they'll let you act on their behalf. And it seems like that kind of thing where a lot of creative parties could have a lot of fun with it. And that's definitely what I wanted to add with this book. People who get crazy ideas and need the mechanics to pull it off. Well, there you go.
So I did want to ask about the web marriages. You mentioned that the web marriages, and then also the Anati are named with a syllable from each of their parents in the web marriage, and all the Anatis have like several syllable names. So I'm assuming polyamory is common among the Anati.
Yeah, that's pretty much their default relationship dynamic. Like most not couples, but polycules, is that the name? I'm bad at this.
Polycule.
Cool. Most of those are like 3 to 5 Anati who get along together and operate as kind of a family unit, and maybe they might do things like run a business together or like collectively vote together in local elections. And it's definitely like the perspective they have going out. It ties in with them wanting to be friends because, of course, they're used to groups of people having very tight bonds together. And the naming thing, actually, I read into that from an NPC in the first book of Age of Ashes. Is this spoiler? Maybe I'll try to be light on the spoilers, but yeah. So I looked into Age of Ashes, and there's an NPC with a name, and I noticed that the NPC's parents, which were listed, all had that syllable dynamic. Their name was a collection of the syllables. So I said, I can work with that. So I did, and I think it's pretty cool.
Did you find that you had a lot of room to explore the lore? Because you really only had the single page before it starts getting into the mechanics.
Yeah, that one I definitely had more of a template to work with. And I threw in my own little touches, like, making the name thing official or kind of going into how they thought. But this one was definitely a bit more on the clarification and elaborating on things that actually have already happened or people might just need a refresher on. And I definitely saw like the mechanics as my primary vehicle for like natural storytelling.
So walking down the spine of the Anati, we've got an 8 hit point ancestry. They're medium sized, so these are big fluffy spiders.
Mm-hmm.
Emphasis on fluffy on every single picture I've seen of them. Default fee 25, dexterity and wisdom as their ability boosts, as well as the free. They have a constitution flaw. Languages is Anati and Mwangi. Traits are Anati humanoid. They have the change shape ability that lets them, as a single action, they can change between their human form, which is a set human form. So you have a set human. You don't get to just look like any human without taking some of the other feats. And their spider form, the advantage is that the spider form can climb on walls and do spidery things like bite things because spiders have fangs. And the humanoid form has the awesome power of opposable thumbs, and therefore they can use manipulation actions. I'm a fan. And other than that, they are pretty much straightforward as an ancestry down the spine wise, except for the whole turning into a spider thing. I like it.
They start as a spider. They turn into a human.
Fair point. They are a spider that can turn into a human. They have several heritages. The first one I like a whole bunch, which is maybe they don't turn into a human. Maybe they turn into one of the cool dwarves with the rainbow beards, because of course they could. Maybe they I like that. So the adaptive Anati, you get the adopted ancestry feat and you pick a different ancestry to go with. You got the polychromatic Anati, which gets to do cool stuff with the thing, so much so that they get the perform feat. You've got the snaring Anati, the spindly Anati. Snaring Anati gets the grapple trait with their fangs. That's kind of scary.
That was fun.
Spindly Anati. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was saying definitely with that one. I I had a little fun writing a bit of goofy text that I knew was going to get cut, but I figured, well, grapple weapons, typically you can drop them instead of like being counter-grappled if you roll a crit fail. Should I write in specifically that you can't drop your fangs? Because, rules is written, there might be a forum thread about that.
You just change it to your human face and your fangs fall out.
Ooh, that is creepy, and I like it.
You know what? While Param's just summarizing the rules, I'm realizing how much the cuteness of the Anati is kind of owed to the art. Because if we had more Ettercap looking art, or whatever we're calling Ettercaps now, web crawlers, this would be a terrifying ancestry.
Yeah. I definitely had a lot of fun looking up types of spiders and research for, okay, what can these spiders do? What can these spiders do? Wow, spiders are crazy. This should be an ancestor. This should be a heritage. This should be a heritage. This could be a feat, And the snaring Anati were definitely inspired by trapdoor spiders. That was the one I looked at for that.
Right. And venomous Anati have venom attack. Spindly Anati have increased speed. So which of the spiders inspired these?
The spindly Anati were definitely daddy long legs because it just seemed like a very obvious thing to throw in. Venomous Anati that goes back to the I want to make an Anati that looks like the bestiary Anati and functions in the same way. Adaptive that's the kind of one that just makes sense to me. Like, yeah, okay, they can be humans, but they're humans because they invented magic. So why couldn't they innovate that magic? Why wouldn't they want to blend in with other types of people? And that just seemed like the kind of thing they would naturally develop. This feels like the kind of heritage that would definitely exist in a future book if I didn't write it now. So I filled that one in. And polychromatic, honestly, all of them have that like bit of color to them. But I figured, what if I just went super intense on it and just said, yeah, you're so colorful, it's just very eye-catching. It's so colorful, it bleeds over into your human form. And I kind of like that idea that maybe sometimes when your spider aspects very slightly seep over into your human form to add that little extra bit of character. Optional, of course, but that's kind of what I had in the back of my head.
I wish I had these rules when I was playing Webster, because then I'd have rules for left, right, butt wiggle.
And an extra bit of fun, I'm imagining like versatile heritages, they could be different. Like if you like the more sinister looking spider, like a Black Widow, maybe you could be a tiefling Anati and that would show up like that, I want to play a tiefling Anati now. That sounds amazing.
Spider with devil horns.
Not to derail, your Anati PC was named Webster?
Yeah, I had a fun with that one.
Nice.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
That's all right. I don't mind. I am a big fan of any of those talk about your character threads you see on the forums, because that's one of my, I'd say guilty pleasure, but more of a shameless pleasure. So it's fun to hear other people talk about their stuff too, especially when it's my beautiful spidery lads.
It was a character we played for an actual play podcast that our listeners can go back and listen to anytime they want, the Mimips 11 podcast. And it was a spider bard that maxed diplomacy.
As a GM, I have a love-hate relationship with like pun names because they're very amusing, but I have to repeat it over and over again.
You got to do it just right. I've retired a couple characters because it's like, this sounds like a great idea, and then I say it to myself 3 times and say, oh, I couldn't even play this in like a few societies before even I get tired of it.
Yeah, I have at least one character that I was like, I love this name idea because if you think of it this way, it's really cool. It shows, how hard he is as just a manual worker. But if you think of it this way, it's extremely sexual, and I do not intend that interpretation of the name. So I'm going to have to just not use that name.
And to defend Webster, it was a self-chosen name intentionally to make humans think of him as less threatening.
That's exactly the kind of thing an Anati would do, really.
So you got cool feats for Anati. They got Studious Magic, there's a lot of feats in here that emphasize that Anati are good at magic, especially the web spell. Which makes sense. And you also have do cool things with Web Weaver, as well as the hybrid shape and friend form we've seen before. Any other feats we want to call out for the Anati before we stop talking about Anati stats?
You covered it pretty well. I definitely enjoyed, I had a lot of fun writing Web Hunter, because I like the idea that, it's another thing that it requires setup, but it feels like it opens up doors for players to do creative things, or even to just set up NPCs who do some fun tricks. But yeah, I definitely just had a lot of fun recreating this stuff. And Web Slinger was pretty good. That one was actually that one's on Paizo. The one I wrote was I had a misunderstanding of unarmed attack rules, so I'm definitely glad they came to my rescue on that one after the final draft came in.
Actually, just for context, when did you write this? How old was a second edition as a game when you were developing these rules?
Oh goodness, this was about a year ago. 2020 was a blur, so it's all just kind of resisting the urge to play in traffic for that time. But other than that, it's a little over a year old. I want to say 14 months off the top of my head. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
my understanding.
It was either April or May when I got the assignment. It was either April or May.
Yeah. So we're even talking about before the Advanced Player's Guide came out.
Yeah, that was the new kid on the block, because I remember we got a lot of leeway with the deadlines, because Paizo is very patient and understanding with how tough things can be for people, especially in, well, I can't call it the current year, but current year TM. So yeah, so it's been a little while, and actually the original Lizard Folk entry in the Advanced Player's Guide, I used that as a good example to help guide me through this. So I'd say in a spiritual way, they're kind of cousins. So use them for an example of all right, what should I do for a bite? What could I do for enhancing natural attacks kind of way? So yeah, pretty good. Have fun with it.
I guess my final thought is, reading over this, you don't get that many ancestry feats, and I want to either make several Anati PCs just to be able to explore the different direction you can go with this, or make an arachnomancer archetype and just reuse all of these feats.
Oh yeah. Actually, I made it. It's all right. I was joining a home game that I'm going to be making an Anati PC for, and I ended up cranking out 5 of them. Okay, 2 of them were swashbucklers, just because I wanted to play different styles of swashbucklers, because man, that class got to blow up in second edition. I mean, wow. Or a naughty druid that just kind of catered tends to mushrooms and just does weird spider stuff and is super chill. Still working on that one.
It's a compliment that I would give up class feats for many of these.
Yeah.
Nice.
Next up, we have the Konrasu, which I believe in last week's episode, Ali said that she wrote these. So neither of you had any contribution to the Konrasu?
Only looking at them in awe and going, what even?
Exactly, it's so good.
That's one of 3 what even ancestries that we got in this book. The Konrasu is conceptually pretty out there. It's not like anything I've ever seen in the game, where you are playing shards of cosmic force, it says, who have taken on an exoskeleton made out of a tree. That sums it up. So if you have any questions, we have no answers.
I like that Starfinder was bragging that we've got a alien species who is a sentient goldfish in a mech suit, and then Pathfinder Second Edition's hold my beer.
Absolutely. I love this ancestry, and I definitely want to play one at some point in the future. I love that after a while you can just build yourself a bigger body. It's man, if I could just build a body, what if bigger? And then you do it.
I was looking over the book earlier today to just sort of do a little preliminary prep, and looking at the Konrasu, I immediately wanted to make a Konrasu NPC. because one of the heritages just lets you heal other people, like no check, no spell. You can heal one person once a day, and like as many people as you want. And so I was like, I should just make a Konrasu doctor and just have them be an NPC.
Well, I was going to say that one of the intriguing things about the ancestry is that of the 3 pieces of art, 2 of them seem like they are still rooted into the ground.
Yeah.
And the idea of a Konrasu doctor could just be like, I'm happy here. This is where I've literally laid my roots. And if you need healing, you come to me because I am tapped into the literal, life force of the planet.
Like, I'm a tree. Someone else built this clinic around me. You just come on in.
Amazing.
With a skylight so that it gets its sun and its rain.
Right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Got to get the sun.
So the part I found really fascinating is that when the Konrasu are together, like the concept of even like individualism and most things and even names are just not part of how they function. And any assumptions that they make of name or a chosen gender or anything is stuff that they do after interacting with other societies to fit in or after exposure to outside society. So this is a truly alien ancestry, literally, considering it's like a bubble of stars connected to a tree. And they also latch on to a very specific being, which is almost always, I need to make sure I get this name right. It's almost always an Aeon. I always get my lawful outsiders confused. I prefer Modrons.
Modron lead us over here.
Yeah, but I do like that it mentions, but not always. And then like sometimes it's even a witch. A witch Konrasu is probably because their patron, they picked a different patron.
So I already have plans on playing a Konrasu, and I picked the ancestry before I really had a concept of the character, because I just, looking at this, it's like, what can I do with this character? And then looking at the mechanics, this is a martial ancestry, which I was not expecting.
Yeah.
It's got 10 hit points. It gets a boost to con and wisdom. It's charisma flaw, which does not affect most martial classes. And it's got built-in healing, and it can heal itself, and you can take the heritage that allows it to heal others. So this is I'm planning on going with a monk with this, and I just think I'm going to tear everything apart, limb from limb, if you will,
including yourself.
I could just toss the limbs aside, grow a new one.
You're done with that one. Just leave it behind.
Wait, if you wielded your own limb that you no longer needed,
I'm listening.
Could you punch at range?
Is that still an unarmed strike? Or is it a double-armed strike?
Or could you, you could make like weapons of wood out of your own parts. And really, a weapon's still a part of you in that way, right? I could see a Konrasu fighter that just specifically uses wood for everything. They're very organic. They don't take from nature, they take from themselves. They're the most like industrious dependent class with like the most nature angle to it.
That's
I can
what
see
the
Konrasu whittling themselves into spears is like the Konrasu equivalent of chewing their nails.
That's what the improvised weapon master is for.
That's true. Yeah, you can actually literally do this. Good point.
So, yeah.
And one of their heritages, the Wright of reinforcement, their body just literally is their armor, and they can even etch magic runes onto themselves to improve it.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at.
It's like an organic golem, kind of. I like that angle to it. It's they like mechanically they feel like something that's essentially a machine, but it's so nature focused. That contrast is amazing. It's one of my favorite ancestries.
It's like an extra planar ent.
So the spine, it has 10 hit points, which is a lot. Size medium, 25 feet. Ability to boost to Constitution and Wisdom, great for monks, and free. Flaw and Charisma, understandable. Languages Mwangi and Rasu. Traits Aeon. They have the Aeon trait, the Konrasu trait, and the plant trait. And Sunlight Healing by default. So they can just 10-minute meditative healing, heal themselves. And it gets better as they level up.
Yeah, it starts at 1d8 and gets an additional 1d8 every 2 levels. Like that. That's beefy. That's good.
Right. Some heritages are Wright of Knowing, which has one of the coolest abilities I've seen in any ancestry, which is the call to Axis. They can just phone into Axis and say, hey, is this information right? And they get to roll twice for a recall knowledge check, and any success is automatically a crit success.
Oh, and you use the higher result. It's not like you re-roll and take the second one.
Right. Yeah, any crit failures just become a failure, and any success becomes a crit success, and you're rolling twice and taking the higher. You're almost guaranteed to get a crit success with this.
Yeah, you have to roll like double 2s to not get it.
I do want this to find. I do kind of want a GM when it does go wrong, and the player's like phoning into Axis. Axis doesn't know what an elephant is.
I'm getting flashbacks to 4th edition's bear lore memes.
Just speaking of GMing for a Konrasu, I have a tendency to get pretty graphic with some of my descriptions of damage. And the idea that I can do that without it being permanent damage to the PC makes me feel like if there's a Konrasu in the party, I would just go buck wild with my descriptions of limbs flying off and the wood cracking. Because, nice. They'll just fix it in the next 10 minutes.
Oh, half the fun's describing the wounds. Yeah, no, that'd be fun.
Apparently we were at the Rite of Light.
Oh, yes. Rite of Light. So this is the one that Michelle was talking about. This is the one where they can heal others instead of just themselves, which is a super cool ability. Then we have the Rite of Passage, which lets them be a little bit more mobile, and they don't have difficult terrain in underbrush or wilderness settings. They always are. They're not flat-footed when they're trying to acrobats. They get critical successes on successes when they're trying to do acrobatics to do balance and other cool things that you would do in the forest. It's like, no, they're just gonna forest on through here. And then finally the Rite of Reinforcement, which is the one we talked about with the built-in automatic armor, which is +4 AC, Dex 1, medium armor, check penalty of -2, and a speed penalty of -5, and a strength score value of 16. But it has the comfort trait, which means you can sleep in it, which is important if it is you.
Then for some of the ancestry feats, the Ceremony of Protection, and there's a lot of really intriguing names, like the fact that all the heritages are rites, that there's several ceremonies are part of the feats. It really gives you a contemplative feel to, again, a very combat effective ancestry. So Ceremony of Protection.
There is one more rite. It's at the top of the next page, the Rite of Invocation.
Oh, yes. I missed this one. Yeah. You're augmented your exoskeleton with magic. You gain 1 cantrip from the arcane or occult spell list. And the standard rules for innate spell after that. That's cool. That's a big get if you want to play a caster.
Free cantrips, like even if you're playing a martial, free cantrips are a big deal. Because like they heighten with your level, so they're just forever good.
If you were okay getting normal armor, Ryan, it could have shield.
I'm reconsidering which of the heritages I might take for my character. Because, it's hard to say no to a cantrip.
It's the best feeling when it's like you're struggling to make a character because too many good things.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of that from these ancestries.
Because, even the Anadi, they only get to choose from arcane, but it makes sense for their background. It totally makes sense that these do occult. Oh, my goodness. And then some of my favorite feats are Ceremony of Growth, the 13th level feat, which is just you just get to be big, like Nate was calling out. I love that concept. Just make me a bigger tree.
Oh, that could be fun too. I could see a GM throwing in a big role-playing moment where, like, during downtime between levels, there's just this scene with you kind of montage building yourself the bigger body. And it's like, this ancestry more than anything makes me wish Pathfinder was an almost cinematic, like a video game that you could play, like the 2nd edition with these. because there are so many interesting visual elements in my mind's eye. Even they're traveling through like brush and terrain. I imagine their body gliding forward as their roots just kind of go in and out the nooks and crannies, like tentacles just drawing them forward. They seem just eerie and otherworldly in so many ways. And now that we're reviewing them, I kind of want to cancel my plans and just make one of these instead.
Overland Gamer in chat is saying, we are Groot. And I do feel like at some point, Groot was some kind of an inspiration for the Konrasu, and then it just went in a very different direction.
I do want to call out that their growth version is better than a lot of other ancestries that are big, because sometimes big is a problem. Having played big characters before,
it's can my bear fit in this dungeon?
Yeah,
the pain of every cavalier everywhere. My heart goes out to you.
Every cavalier rides a bear?
Horse. I wish cavaliers could ride bear cavalier.
I think that's legal.
There's another thing I want to play.
But they can, but Konrasu can shrink if they want to.
Yeah, you can dismiss or resume as an action, which is great.
Maybe it collapses in on itself or folds, kind of like a transformer thing.
I mean, just tear off a chunk and start dragging it behind him. It'll attach back later.
That's fair. I like that. God, I like this ancestry. The more I talk about it, the more I want to play one.
I think it's a good time to move on to the Knoll. Neither of you had your hands in the Knoll, right? Am I right?
That's correct. Or I didn't, anyway.
So during PaizoCon, I was talking to Eleanor about how the Knoll was the one that really, like, I don't know if I could picture the Knoll as anything but the Joker of ancestries, the giddy, laughing, like Lion King villain. And I kind of like that the Knoll here does not really try to be anything but that. There's a couple of heritages that cutify the Knoll, but otherwise it's just accepting. Oh, I love the line, "To Knoll's honor is just another word for pointless risk." So it completely embraces the concept of the default Knoll, and it just kind of contextualizes it from the Knoll's point of view. And yeah, I wasn't sure if it would win me over, but the combination of lines like that and just a really flexible set of ancestry feats makes this an ancestry that I could see myself playing. And that gets me more invested into making sure that whatever character I play, I come up with hooks to make sure that it's not the Knoll that you might just pigeonhole into the chaotic villain.
I do like that it has a lot of mythologically inspired elements too, though. So, like, Knolls can get ventriloquism because that's been a lot of mythological power. The whole as we were told during the last time we talked about the Knolls, the whole right half of their body heals while the left half of their body is poison, and that's represented here with the right hand blood feet. So like there's a lot of callbacks to which is one of the things I love about when Pathfinder explores the mythologically inspired, a lot of callbacks to that original mythology that has been since dismissed in earlier versions of the game.
I also, Param, suspect that you are a big fan of the Ant Knoll.
I like cute things. Ant Knoll's fine. I'm glad Ant Knoll has got a big forum cheer thread going on right now. So I, respect to the Ant Knoll. No need to play an Ant Knoll. I'm gonna throw up the picture though because it's the cutest thing.
Yeah. It's the Knoll pup.
I do love the Ant Knoll. The itty bitty one is the only one that's like really serious and earnest.
Because it mentions in the Ant Knoll heritage, which it's a Knoll that's small size, and they get bonuses to lying and to detect lying. But people don't even believe they're Knolls, and they are constantly trying to convince people, "No, I'm a Knoll."
All right, Param, you want to take us through the spine again?
Yeah, 8 hit points, which is pretty standard. We've got medium size, 25 feet speed, which that surprises me. I expected that to be faster. Strength and intelligence for boost, which is a nice power couple to have for stats. Wisdom flaw, which doesn't surprise me because that'd be my choice for Knoll too. Common and Knoll languages. They get a bite attack and low light vision. They have 4 heritages. I keep the one that sneaks onto the next page always catches me. So the Ant Gnoll, which we just talked about, which is the small size gnoll with the bonus to deception. We've got the Great Gnoll, which would be the traditional image of the gnoll, which gets 10 hit points from ancestry instead of 8, and a +1 circumstance bonus to athletics checks for shove and drip. You got the Sweet Breath Gnoll, which is a gnoll with unusually sweet breath that they can use to gain a +1 bonus to make an impression and diplomacy.
Yeah, so when I read the name of that heritage, I'm like, what? And then you read the first line, and it's like, yeah, your breath is especially good. And it's just, what? But then it starts explaining that, yeah, it's to draw in prey and to like disarm people in social encounters. And it's like, okay, I didn't know where this was going, but now I could see how I could use this.
And I kind of wonder where, like, I wish I knew if this was mythologically or culturally inspired, but like part of me also knows that, like, I've seen a couple monsters that have a similar ability, but the sweetness comes from decay, which makes it extra creepy. And then there's the Witch Gnoll, which gets the ghost sound cantrip as an occult, so they get to do that cool thing without taking the feat for it later, and they get a +1 circumstance bonus to impersonate. So if you want the gnoll that's sounding like your friend and that needs help, this is the one to go to.
Oh, Nate, you're muted.
Oh, we've Nate.
Did we lose Nate?
There we go.
Okay.
I don't know how that happened, but technology is cursed. Anyway, yeah. With the gnolls, it really seems like you can have a lot of fun with them, especially with throwing your voice, pulling tricks on enemies. I'm almost imagining the sort of Batman angle where you use fear and misdirection to mess with your enemies. So I could definitely see some fun there, or just with classic NPCs and villains and enemies.
Yeah, and the feats really help you with that, because it's basically pick any class you would want to play as this gnoll. It's got some kind of feat that can help you with that angle.
Mm-hmm. Also, just like with Strength of the Thousands, like you're talking about like as like a hunter or as like a trickster, but also just like a college prankster. Like all of these would be perfect for that. Like the Sweet Breath Gnoll, like, no, that paper is totally due next week.
Yeah, and the principal's just furious at you in like a college movie. Gnoll House!
I love the picture of the Sweet Breath Gnoll they have on page 113. Is like, yeah, she is having a great time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It definitely adds to the flavor. Like, yeah, you're going to enjoy yourself with this one. Have some fun, dance around, play some pranks, get a good laugh out of it, in and out of character. Definitely a fun ancestry to play.
They have one of the coolest top level ancestry feats, though. With Ancestors Rage, they turn into a magic giant hyena!
Very nice. Very nice.
And that pairs well. If you get the hyena familiar, where you get a tiny familiar, a tiny hyena at first level, and then you turn into a giant one, you've really got the what were the name of the two dogs? Where it's like one is gigantic and beefy and like just really slow plotting, and the other one is small and hyper and super enthusiastic. You know what? There's probably many. That probably describes a lot of cartoon duos.
You know, I do like the idea of the tiny gnoll familiar, or the tiny gnoll familiar, tiny hyena familiar, because in my mind's eye, it's a fully grown hyena that just happens to be the size of a house cat.
It's a teacup hyena.
Wait, is that actually a thing?
No, not that I know of.
Well, it can be. It's fantasy. We can do what we want.
Yeah. Well, I think like a tiny creature, that is like probably about like a small hyena. That's not too far-fetched.
Yeah, it's usually the default tiny creature is a cat. And so, like, tiny really feels like a hamster, but no, if you're talking about a cat-sized hyena, I can picture it.
Well, someone to laugh along with you, for sure.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to the Goloma
Goloma.
Goloma? All right. Anyone here have any personal experience with the Goloma?
Again, only just looking at them and going, wow.
So, this was a thing I didn't expect to be in this book.
I can say it's not something I would have expected in any book.
Definitely caught me off guard.
So, you know what? As much fun as we had describing the Konrasu as an out there idea, the Goloma's even harder to summarize than the Konrasu. It's they have unusual biology, is how it calls it out in the description. It's got a bit of a humanoid xenomorph hybrid look to it. It's chitinous that is not like a mask or a helmet like you might think. And it actually really leans into the fact that it has multiple eyes and very different type of perception. And sorry?
The art for the first one, the design, it's like it has a whole bunch of actual eyes, but then 2 fake eyes that are just part of the patterning, which that was an interesting choice and I love it.
Yeah, that's very fun.
Sorry.
I was just saying, it's very fun. I feel like I would describe Goloma as like the most logical evolution of a horse. Whereas I feel like with like catfolk and gnolls, it's like, what if a hyena was a person? Which is cool. But with Goloma, it's like horses are super skittish prey animals. What would they turn into in a million years if they like developed a society? And like that's why I love them.
Yeah, so even though it might be hard for us to describe them physically, I do enjoy the society that was described of them being constantly treated as like these horrors that like they are not. They have no ill will towards others, and yet they have been so mistreated and so abused just for looking so alien that like even if you just look at most of the ancestry feats, there's a real sense of like watch your back and be strong, like be courageous. And like really like about half of these are about perception and senses and just making sure that they are physically like no, I've lost it. Sorry. That's basically that they are in a defensive position and that they do not make themselves vulnerable to the people that just instinctively dislike them.
I mean, if you look at the art, like they have what look like little beads in their hair. No, that's more eyes. They have eyes in their hair.
Yeah, I like the whole. I like how eyes are a central part of their design, like in everywhere. They have eyes all over their face. They have eyes in the back of their head. Most of their mechanics relate to their eyes, and the fact that they have those 2 decoy eyes on top really goes back to their lore of the fact that they're worried that other people are here to take their eyes. So it's almost like they just have this distraction set of eyes just in case.
And for anyone that hasn't seen the art, the eyes are just kind of like little beads of light. So if you are the kind of person that just gets uncomfortable when eyes are in places that they shouldn't be, and we will be talking about that when we get to the bestiary of the book, this isn't a visually uncomfortable creature. In fact, I find the visual quite striking, especially the one on page 116. He just looks awesome.
Oh, he looks like the boss of a Japanese RPG.
Yeah,
it really does. I can hear a Persona theme playing in the back of my head now that I think about it.
So the weird thought I had reading over the Goloma is that some people say that Die Hard and Alien are the same movie just from different perspectives. This feels like if you wanted the xenomorph to be the star of Die Hard, that is what a Goloma is.
Oh, I love that. I've heard that before, but I love that.
Goloma spine, 8 hit points. So normal, medium size, speed 30. They're fast. This leans into Michelle's theory they might be horse related. Ability boost, wisdom and free, which is less than normal.
Well, that's because they don't get a flaw.
Oh yeah, no flaw. Languages, Gloma Mwangi. Traits, Gloma humanoid. And their special ability, eyes in the back. Which, when you sneak basic action, when they use the seek basic action, they can search 2 areas at once instead of 1. Even if it's a burst or a cone. No sneaking up on Gloma.
And then the heritages, we've got the Farsighted Gloma, which gains low light vision, the Frightful Gloma. So that's the other theme. The main theme is perception. The other one is that they can be intimidating. But that's more for the benefit of the people that might think about messing with them. They want to give you kind of like the warning of like, just leave me alone, buddy. So you're trained in intimidation, you get intimidation glare as a bonus feat.
It kind of I hate to say this, it reminds me of my sugar glider, where when she was a baby and it's like scaring her, then she would just go big as possible, scary, scary, scary. It never worked, but
yeah, it's just like if they are also afraid of me, maybe they'll leave me alone.
Yeah, and they may not be demonic in nature, but like I'm just imagining what like their "I'm scared, but I'm trying to scare you back" cry would sound like, and it's just terrifying. Like an echoing, deep, neighing sound.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We have the Insightful Gloma, which gets a bonus on perception to your perception DC against attempts to lie to you, and perception checks to sense motive. The Vicious Gloma, what do you get? You get a claw attack. And the Vigilant Gloma, you can cast Detect Magic as a cantrip.
Useful.
So what I like about Gloma is that because they don't have an ability flaw, you can really get like very strange with them as far as like builds. I did a count to see how many ancestries don't have flaws, and with Gloma and one other one we'll get to, it's up to 7 now.
Oh, that many.
Yeah. So humans, obviously you get 2 free boosts, no flaw. And then Kitsune, Orc, Strix, and Tengu all have 2 boosts and no flaw. And also I was checking which boosts they get. So there is an ancestry for every boost except con if you don't want to take a flaw. So I really love that now if you do want to do something that's like weird or like something that's not optimal, you don't have to be a human.
Yeah, that's definitely good. I played a ton of humans back in first edition Society because they were just such a template that I could build off of. I liked other like ancestries and races, but they were definitely my default every time. So once I start building a roster, I'm definitely going to tap into more options.
Oh, I forgot to mention, every ancestry except Null has been rare so far, and Null is uncommon.
That's true, unless you are in the Mwangi.
Then it bumps it down by 1?
Yeah, it's up in the intro of the book. If you're playing a Mwangi campaign, it recommends shifting the rarities. So like goblins and starts with a G, gnomes. Goblins and gnomes become uncommon, and gnolls, gripply, and catfolk become common. But that's an optional rule.
All right, we are about halfway through the episode, so I think we can kind of go a little fast for the last couple of ancestries. We've got the Gripply, which, it's exactly what we expected the Gripply to be, more or less.
Yeah. Small, 6 hit points, Dex Wisdom boost, a Strength flaw. We've seen Gripply before. Gripply is a ancestry that has shown up a lot in the game. I have one complaint about the Gripply.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's only one, is that they have one of their ancestries is kind of useful only in that it unlocks feats for you to take later, which is the Snap Tongue Gripply. So you get the Poison-Hide Gripply, which has a toxic skin. You've got Sticky Toe Gripply, which can climb because frogs have sticky toes. You've got the Windweb Gripply. All this stuff is cool. Then you got the Snap Tongue Gripply, which is the part of the Gripply that the frog has the tongue. It's the one that does the tongue thing. Except for by default, it's let you use your tongue as if it's a hand. No bonuses. And even it's not even a very good hand. You can't use it. So by default, it doesn't really do anything for your character at all. And you have to unlock reach later with higher level feats. And
5th level.
Yeah, it's like you don't get to. This is the one time I'm going to make a complaint about something like that, and it's just because I think that Paizo could have eased up on that and let this give you the 5-foot reach to here at the start, because you're giving up a cool thing. This is an important part of your heritage. They could have had because the tongue can't do anything besides touch attacks and minor things. It can't wield a weapon or anything like that. So that wouldn't have been overpowered.
I will say I understand the frustration, because I also do. There are certain feats that I wish were like a little more, but it does mean if you have like a weapon in each hand, you wouldn't have to put down a weapon to cast a spell. So.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't know it counted as a free hand.
I thought you couldn't do manipulate actions.
Well, it's touch spells, so I assume that you can still cast a spell. But you still need a hand
perform actions that require fingers or significant manual dexterity.
Yeah.
Would the tongue not count for a somatic component?
No,
I figure it wasn't.
So. But hey, it would be that would at least make it useful. I would definitely allow it. We forgot to ask. Michelle, was this your ancestry?
No, I didn't do this.
Okay, I felt suddenly bad if the only one I have a criticism about was your one.
She takes off her headset, leaves.
I didn't do any of the ancestries.
Okay.
When later on, I'll have a lot more to say, but yeah.
We're getting to religion, and I know you did like half the gods, so
close to it.
Ooh, let's see if you did my favorite one.
Ooh,
we'll get to that.
I did not write Lubaika, just to.
I'm ready to move on from Gripply. No offense to the author of it, but it is the Gripply. It is probably the ancestry we are the most familiar with, and it meets more or less our expectations.
Yeah.
Except
other than that one complaint I had about the tongue thing, everything else about the Gripply is spot on, well implemented. Love it.
I will say it is cool that they do get more tongue feats later. That if you want to dedicate yourself, and their feat to vacuum up toxin. Really adds this cool kind of way that, you're poisoned focused, not just to attack, but to protect. And I do think that's a pretty creative use of their abilities. So I do think it's a fun ancestry, and I definitely play one. It is very much going on the bucket list.
And because of Age of Ashes, there's a soft spot in my players' hearts for the Gripply because of how horribly abused they were by the Sherikah in that adventure.
Kind of curious if we can make a decent Gripply Magus using the snap tongue just as is.
Shisk, the last ancestry.
Yeah, so Shisk is fairly easy to describe physically. It is a human with bone feathers that kind of look like quills. Conceptually, though, even knowing what it is, it's still a little hard to wrap your head around. Let me see my notes here. Quill-feathered recluses who trade in art and information. Oh yeah, that was super interesting. They are
secrets.
Yes,
it's big on secrets. In fact, I like the line at the bottom of the society. It's like, on the few occasion when Shisk sages or diplomats convinced different groups of Shisk to put aside their differences and collaborate, great puzzles and mysteries of Golarion have been solved in a matter of hours.
Yeah, I do like these Shisk a lot. Like, as I mentioned in the pre-show chatter, one of the games that influenced me was like World of Darkness. So the idea of an ancestry that commonly trades in information and secrets, and maybe not your usual like dungeon delving that you'd see in a more stereotypical game, does pique my interest as a option for the right kind of campaign. And I definitely play one of these too.
I also appreciate there's nothing sinister about the fact that they trade in information. That is usually how you describe, like, keepers of lore and people that like are really conserve information. This is what they trade in. This is how their society functions. They don't care about material goods, but they are really interested, or they really value what information can get to you. But I also like that it's not just information, it's art. If you are trying to get something from them, if you're trying to trade with them, and you just put on a really impressive performance, that is an experience to the Shisk, and that is the kind of thing as creatures that do not tend to write creatures, as a society that does not tend to write things down, they value the experience of the moment, and that's what a really cool art performance can do, and they value that as highly as information.
And I do like that it isn't necessarily sinister, but then they do include that little hint of sinister when they talks about their major faiths, like the green faith being common. Also, they often will worship forgotten gods, which is such a cool character hook going into that, but then it ends with, and also Ires Nethys and Nobagobber. Nobagobber. That there's nothing more sinister than worshiping Nobagobber.
They're not sinister by default, but like every ancestry has the dark side.
You can be a neutral worshiper of Nobagobber. It's fine. It's chill.
You know, I'm kind of imagining playing like a investigator Shisk, and they'd be a rich noble, but only because they know so many things. They'd still be dressed in common garb and not have much jewelry, but they know so many things that they're
it'd be a frustrating character to GM for, because they trigger their that's strange, and make all these knowledge rolls, and they would never share it with the party.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, because like I love the idea of playing a character who knows everything, but usually I brag about knowing everything. It would be weird to play a character who knows everything and just goes, "Oh, okay, I figured it out." And so, what'd you figure out? Yeah, don't worry about it.
No, see, that's how you pay them, though. The party works for you. That's how that's the paycheck. You share with them. It's doing the right thing for the wrong reason is one of my favorite ways to play a character.
The cleric's like, if you want me to heal that sword wound, you are going to tell me what that guy said to you earlier.
Good times.
The spine is 8 hit points, medium, 25 speed, ability boost intelligence and free, no flaw, and dark vision as their special ability.
I was kind of assuming they would get strength or con as flaw, just because there was like a frailty that was throughout their physical description, but no.
Heritages, Lorekeeper Shisk, which they get a bonus lore skill, either intelligence or wisdom base. Quillcoat Shisk, which actually, if you attack them, those quills hurt you back. You know, like this is one of the most powerful thorn shields I've seen on an ancestry. Like even the poison frog one for the Gripply isn't as powerful as this, because this actually works on weapon hits. Usually those sorts of things only work on unarmed hits.
Yeah, although quills is once per day and poison is once per hour. So
quill can also cause
a lot of
damage.
It's 1d8 that scales.
I definitely like that. If you go in on those quills, you can just pick every ancestry feat to say, but what if more quills and sharper quills and I punch with quills? What if I just want to be a big spiky ball of pain?
It's also this close to being marrow and shooting quills.
Ooh,
and I wish it could get that far.
Well, if we get the shifter in 2nd edition...
Well, at level 9, it's a 30-foot cone.
True. Oh, never mind.
Yeah. It's once per day, but if you want to
quill spray.
I missed that because they also got a quill. I didn't 2 quill things in the same bracket.
Yeah, you can be very sharp or you can be very sharp.
See,
those are the 2 routes you can take.
I like it. They have a very focused design, and I can appreciate that, because you know what you're getting into when you roll one of these. You're going to want to do one of those 2 things, either secrets or quills, and you have plenty to work with.
Almost all defensive, which really applies for any class. And then with like no flaw and intelligence boost, you really could make a Shisk of any class, and it could work. It could work really easily.
Mm-hmm. And that brings our ancestries to a close, and leads us into like literally just the next couple of pages straight into the religion section.
All right, Michelle, why don't you kick off? What was kind of the design goals and the direction for the religion section of the Mwangi Expanse?
So it was sort of 2 big things, I think. One was like a lot of there are a lot of religions from outside of the Mwangi. We haven't really seen what is inside the Mwangi, except for if you do Serpent Skull, there's Idersius, there's Agajan, and I think there's no other one. So it's we know that different cultures have different faiths. We know that in Tianjia they have different deities. We know that in Arcadia they have different deities. So to be able to look at a wide variety of religions from this region to sort of reflect different philosophies and different walks of life was very important. And also, there are like other religions from other parts of the world that they're approaching from their own perspective. Like it's not, she doesn't get a full write up, but I think it's is it Kazutal, who's the mother jaguar, gets mentioned in the orc section. They have a different name for her. They draw her as like looking orcish with like big fangs. So when each culture is going to have their own sort of spin on like, well, we think this is what this deity is trying to say. That great art of Desna, with just galaxies in her hair, is just amazing. And it's like, obviously, people imagine gods being like themselves, and their art and their, writing is going to reflect that. So what do gods look like in this part of the world?
Yeah, I feel like that's been part of the Galarian lore, like the whole time, that different cultures interpret the gods differently, but we rarely see it in art. The gods are pretty consistent with how they first appeared. So seeing Desna so radically different, it's nice. It's nice to actually see that part of the lore actualized in art.
Yeah, it's definitely, so here's I obviously when I'm writing it, the art hasn't been drawn yet. So I don't see the art until only a little bit before other folks do. And every time I'm just so blown away by it. Like I mentioned Lubaiko earlier, she's my favorite. She's everybody's favorite. I didn't write that one, but like when you just see her in like that duster and like the flaming hair, it's like, yes, that's what I want to see. That's like it's not just representation. It's an ideal. It's a fantasy of
it's a
like
call to action.
Exactly. It's like, it's one thing to see like, like black people, like to see like all of the Bekyar and the Vidrix, like that's amazing. But also to see like black gods who are, so grand and so amazing as like being presented in this like role of importance is a big deal.
And I don't want to diminish Lubaiku's write-up, but the art was so perfect that it sells everything you need to know about Lubaiku you can get from that piece of art, which is something absolutely astonishing to see. I do not see art that well implemented. I mean, looking at that piece of art, it is easy to see why she would have a following.
Yeah. This one is like one of my top 5 in this book, and that's hard because this book's art is amazing, like cover to cover, literally cover to cover.
Yeah.
And she wasn't my favorite, but she's a close second.
Ooh. When we get to your favorite, call it out.
Oh, I will.
All right, Michelle, you did Adanya, right? Our first god?
No.
No.
I'll tell you the ones that I did because they're a little spread out in here. But I guess are you gonna go through them in order, or?
Param, how do you want to do this?
Let's make sure we do Michelle's first, okay, and then cover the because I want to give we gave Nate half an hour of gush over spiders, and I want to make sure Michelle gets her well-deserved gush.
Well, actually, then why don't we start with Grandmother Spider?
Ooh. Yeah, let's start with Grandmother Spider. So this is her second like full page write-up because Grandmother Spider is in Gods and Magic, but this is what I was talking about. I wanted to focus on what Grandmother Spider means to the people in the Mwangi. And, there's a big emphasis on oral tradition, on storytelling, on like passing stories through generations to like carry on lessons and carry on your history. And so obviously the God of Stories is a big deal. She's like, I think we tend to just think of stories as entertainment, but like in a lot of cultures, like stories are a link to your ancestors. And so I really wanted to focus on her importance there. Um, and, also just focus on, she is kind of a badass, and I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call that the upper limit.
Okay. Because it mentions that she like plays pranks on the other gods, or she did once at least. And like I really wanted to focus on that. And I love that in this art they have the copies of Asmodeus's keys that she made.
Just taunting him with it, just waving them around.
Yeah. Now this is the mechanics episode, so I don't want to skip the mechanics. Hers were already established in Gods and Magic. So like she's neutral, so you get harm or heal. She gives you crafting. Her domains: creation, fate, family, trickery, change, and darkness. So it's a lot of like illusion stuff, but it's also a lot of insect themed stuff, and like glibness, which is such a fun spell because it just lets you say the most ridiculous things and people believe you.
Were her edicts already established, or did you write these?
Yes, these were established. So it's Be skilled and clever, think for yourself, take due payment for your work, humiliate the powerful. Those are her edicts. Her anathema are: abuse someone you have power over, harm someone who has given you sincere kindness, let a slight go unanswered, or own a slave. Which her anathema is basically just like, don't let people mess with you. Like, it's like, be fair, but don't let people mess with you.
Stand up to bullies. Yeah, I definitely like this one. Not to cut in too much, but I mean, considering I wrote the Anati, I feel like we were kind of spiritually collaborating on this one.
Michelle, was it your idea to give her the nickname Nana Anati? I never heard that
that's
before.
A pre-existing lore. So she is considered like a patron deity of the Anati. But that's an established thing.
Mm-hmm. So because she's already fairly established and you only had one page to work with, a lot of which is taken up with stuff that's already been established, what are some of your favorite contributions that you've added to the Grandmother Spider lore?
I hinted at a couple of things that I sort of wanted to imply that her legend is so big you couldn't really cover it. So like I hinted at the century of the unbalanced scale. So I'm just imagining 100 years where Abadar is like doing all of his banking and all of his bookkeeping. And then 99 and a half years in, he goes, wait a minute, what is this?
Oh,
how long has this little spider been here? I also mentioned, like, obviously Grandmother Spider would support abolitionists and freedom fighters. Like, that just makes sense with like her edicts and anathemas and like her own story. She was a servant to the other gods and they didn't give her like the respect that she deserved. So she made herself a god. So like, obviously she's going to support other people who are like fighting for their freedom and like, trying to raise themselves up, not to be better than anyone, but just to get the position that they deserve. And so I wanted to make sure that I put emphasis on that.
We do know that she is one of the most popular gods in the settings, because if you remember when we did when No Direction helped with the Pantheon contest, and that Dustin helped organize, and it was Grandmother Spider was like every third Pantheon. Everybody wanted to get Grandmother Spider in there, so there's much love for Grandmother Spider in the fan base.
Another very comforting god that you contributed to was Maslude, the mother of hearth and wall.
Yes. So this is another one who is not technically a Mwangi deity, Mazlude is the patron deity of Halamog, which is it's in Garund. It's like west or east. It's east of the Mwangi Expanse. It's not in the Mwangi. But she's a god of community and negotiation and balance. Her areas of current balance, community, negotiation, twilight. And so I was thinking, because these regions are so close together, they are going to have interaction. People are going to be traveling back and forth, and so they're going to take their sort of religion with them. And I like the idea of sort of the Mwangi people being introduced to a deity who is all about taking care of your neighbors, being kind to each other, being fair to each other. And they go, we already do that. So it's why wouldn't they adopt this deity who just represents things that they already do, the way they already live their life? And it's just such an easy fit that she's just sort of blended into Mwangi society over time. I did write this avatar spell. So I have a question. Has anyone ever cast the avatar spell? I've never taken a PC to a high enough level to do that. And I know we're very new into the edition. I really want to know if anyone's ever cast the avatar spell.
I want to, because the avatar spell is one of my favorite spells in the game, because I love it when mechanics and flavor mingle, and this spell is kind of perfect for that. You're embodying your deity in the most literal sense. And I do like some of the options you got here, like the idea of causing a stone rain seems like a fun kind of attack. It definitely feels like a late game, like even a JRPG where all your regular attacks start looking like spectacles in their own right.
But no, I've never gotten a cleric high or a divine caster high enough to be able to pull the trick off, and it's a shame.
Yeah, it is a spell that demands a lot of page count and will just continue to need it as the game grows.
Yeah, the archives from Nethys page for Avatar is
oh no.
I had to cross-reference it a lot. But for anyone who doesn't know, Avatar is either the 9th or 10th level divine spell where you literally transform into your a representative of your deity, and so you become a huge divine battle form. So when you transform into Mazlude, who is she's like a giant serpent whose hair is full of figs and eggs, because she represents the hearth and the home and birth and balance. So you get a bite attack, you get a viper bite, and because she's the goddess of walls, you can rain stones down on people.
I like that that was the inspiration. I wouldn't have gone there with the walls being the obvious source of the stones. Does a wall just appear and then fall over on the enemy when you want it to happen?
That's how I imagine it.
You want to break the wall down, the wall will break you.
Yeah. Also, I don't know how many battle forms have it. I think this might be the second one. I did give it a shield with 15 hardness and can't be damaged. I think Iomade has the same thing in her avatar form.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, that's smart. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, the favored weapon is a shield, so I had to work that in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right, you also have 3 linked gods, the old sun gods.
Yes.
Shohar, Luhar, and I want to say Tlehar?
Tlehar, that's how I've been pronouncing it. I also don't get pronunciation guides,
right.
So I just sort of...
it happens.
But yeah, these are the old sun gods. They're basically a trio that represent the dawn, the midday, and the dusk. And they are very interesting because they're sort of they're intrinsically linked to each other. They're intrinsically linked to Walkenna, the nation of Mazali. And so all of this lore has to sort of build on itself. So I'll go through them in order. So Chohar is the golden lion. He is the midday sun. He represents justice, loyalty, and work. So he is the lawful good, like the quintessential good guy deity who is just all about like doing the right thing and protecting others. Don't tell lies. If you say you're going to do something, do it. His favorite weapon is the star knife, so he gets to join that club. And admittedly, he is just sort of like, out of the three sun gods, he's kind of the vanilla option. He's just like, because he is just, I am about doing the right thing. And it's like very focused on like his sort of rivalry with Walkenna, who is like Walkenna who claims to be about justice, but is like doing it wrong in his opinion. And so he's like, I'm going to show you how to do justice the right way. His avatar form gives you airwalk. He has a jaw attack that also deals fire damage, and his ranged attack is a sunbeam.
Nice.
He gives you like all fire spells. There's Burning Hands, Fireball, and Fire Shield are the cleric spells. So it's just all about fire and sun. And out of the three, I wrote that he's basically the one who gets the most worshippers out of the three because he doesn't really ask for anything extra. It's just like, be cool, be nice to each other. That's all you have to do. And Luhar and Tilahar kind of get into like more specifics. So Luhar is the setting sun, and it's sort of like she's a sun god, but also has like a bit of night in her domain because her areas of concern are death, dreams, and destiny. She is all about sleep. She's all about dreams. It is anathema to stay up all night without any breaks for sleeping or dreaming. So like don't pull any all-nighters. You will go to bed, you will get your rest. But it's also a big focus on making sure that the night is safe. So it's sort of like when the other sun gods are gone, she's just sort of keeping watch until morning and like just making sure you get to the next day. She also has a big emphasis on death. So that is why her avatar form actually has a range attack that deals negative damage. It's called Touch of Mercy. So it's just like she's about calm, painless deaths that are just like falling into a beautiful sleep. She has this thing where essentially like she has like these little obsidian lion tokens that her priests will bury people with because they believe that when they awaken in the afterlife, they'll have a black lion to protect their soul. Yeah, she is the lawful neutral one, which I'll point out. So because Chohar is lawful good, Luhar is lawful neutral. She doesn't really care about being. It's hard to like sort of define like what is good, but like she cares about you doing what is right more than she cares about you doing what is nice. So like Luhar is not necessarily a nice deity, but she is going to do her job, essentially. Which
like there is an order of things, including the passage of life to death, and she is just all about maintaining that order and making sure that people don't disrupt anyone else for personal gain.
Right, that's a big thing. Like, because she's all about like going into your death peacefully. She really does despise undead. And so like Walkenna, she's just like, no, I already put you to sleep, and now I'm going to put you back to sleep, and you're going to stay there. Like, it's past your bedtime, young man.
Yeah, and I love the last. I love the last.
No, you're doing exactly what I was going to go for it.
I love the last line in the fact that she's preparing an even more beautiful death, because not only does that really sell the flavor of how she perceives it, but that's a story hook. One thing I've loved about reading a lot of different RPGs, and even in Pathfinder 2, when a little line just drops a little hint of a story hook and gets you excited. And this is definitely one of the better ones that I've seen in the system, in the lore.
Actually, I was going to call out, that's absolutely true. I was going to call out something that I found absolutely brilliant with the way you wrote this, Michelle, is that she's not mad at Walkana. She's mad at the people who brought Walkana back. And then you end that with, when their time came, Luhana did not answer their prayers. Their ends were not peaceful. They were not brief, and they did not find rest in her domain. And that sold her so well. You did so great with that.
Yeah, she's, like I said, she's about doing the right thing, not the nice thing. Now, on the opposite side of that, you have Telehar, who is the neutral good. She is all about hope and kindness and light. She is the dawn. She is the hope for a new and better day. She's the nice sister. So she is a god of iron, love, and rebirth. And so when I was writing her, I was sort of thinking like, okay, love and iron, how do you reconcile that? And I think what I wanted to get across with her is that love is not, like, you feeling that you love someone is not an excuse to mistreat them. And so, like, it is anathema for her, for you to treat a loved one poorly. If you are like, if your love is toxic, if your love is hurtful, she will give you a chance to turn it around. And like, there's a reason why one hand is like open and one hand has a morning star in it. Because yeah, if you are hurting the people you love, you don't really love them. And that is something that she enforces strictly.
So I just made, in case anyone was wondering what that strange facial reaction I just made was, that's the same thing of the Lincoln Memorial. He's got one hand open and one hand is a closed fist, but it's also how the original He-Man was made. And so I always associate the like willing to shake the hand, but also willing to throw a fist with He-Man, which it made me giggle. But anyway, something that actually I really enjoyed here was one of her anathemas, lose your motivation to your regrets. It's such a loaded and philosophical idea. And you kind of touched on it, that if you make mistakes, she will let you try and earn forgiveness or make up for them. And the idea that it's like, I shouldn't have done that, but eventually you just become okay with something that you know you shouldn't have done. That's where she gets mad at you. That is such a cool idea for a god.
Yeah, it really is just about like, she is about a better tomorrow. It's like, you made mistakes, that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day, make it right. I also, this was very important for you to mention that like, she's the god of rebirth in the literal sense and the figurative sense. She is like, she like presides over like literal births, like midwives and nurses will pray to her. I also wanted to emphasize that like, if a person is coming into like their new life, their new reality, if they are coming to terms with a new gender or a new sexuality, she is also supportive of that kind of rebirth, and she wants to protect you and guide you through that as well. Which I took inspiration of that from an entry in Legends, because Sihar of the Bright Lions is a trans woman. And I think as it was written, it was sort of that like, when she discovered the old sun gods, that's when she sort of discovered her new self and changed her name. And I said, I want to build on that and push that forward and keep that as a positive thing.
Oh, that is so smart. And I love that you made that connection and really like emphasized it. So I think that's it for your contributions to the religion section, right? Not that wasn't a lot, but just making sure if we do kind of rush through the last of the entries and talk about our highlights.
Yeah, those were my ones. The 5 that I did. It's one of those situations. I think Ali also mentioned on the last episode. When I got the email and it was like, what do you want to write? And I was just like, I guess any one of these 5 would be fine. And it's like, okay, you can
the
can write those 5.
Well, you getting all 3 of the old sun gods, that really allowed you to craft a dynamic between the 3.
I was very happy with that because I was very glad that I was able to sort of write them in a way that mirror each other.
Yeah, it's fun when the deities have relationships together because then you get a lot of fun player and NPC and lore opportunities. Like when deities have relationships with each other, that can reflect in the followers. So that can just lead to a lot of fun setting stuff, especially when they occupy the same space and have like similar goals. And it's like an Avengers team up on the divine level.
So one thing I do want to call out about this section, and it is related to the art, is the the symbols of the gods. So in the past, one of my complaints is that often the symbols of the gods are depicted that you need like an art degree to be able to recreate them. And the idea of a symbol of a god is that if somebody is just drawing in the sand, they should be able to say like, this is a visual representation of my entire religion and everything I believe in. And the symbols of the gods here really reflect that. These are things that like, even like Chohar, that is a very nicely done version of a symbol, but that is also something that if I just had a stick and some sand, I could absolutely recreate an approximation of that. So that is something that I am glad that Paizo's art direction has gone towards.
A lion and a sun, very straightforward. It's nice. I like the grandmother spider symbol because it's this nice little geometric shape with the webbing in it. And you could just draw that with a series of lines and just have fun creating that. Probably don't even have to draw it exactly as is, just
a diamond. You have to draw it exactly as is. That is symmetrical in every which way, which is perfect for a neutral god called the Weaver.
True. I didn't think about it like that. But yeah, definitely a lot of fun and creativity went into these symbols. And a lot of them sell the personality of the deity looking at it.
And I guess just one more god that I want to bring attention to is Balumdar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Apparently he's a crowd pleaser, but just the god of really big things is really appealing to me. Like,
it's amazing.
You have gods that are like, this reflects my philosophy so much, or this reflects my history and what I've endured. And he's just like, I'm big, that guy's big, we get each other.
Ever since I saw this little comedy video called Huge Quest like 7 years ago, the idea of someone on a quest for bigness to become huge, to like take a paladin speech, but replace every word of good, justice, or light with a thesaurus with the word big. And it's amazing. Like, yes, I am huge. I will defend you. You have bigness within your heart. You will be a good person. And just like flexing your way to a good life. It's amazing.
I love that it's a god I could worship by just trying to grow the biggest pumpkin ever.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Balumdar would love that.
Nickname, he who is massive, the god of all things, all huge things in the world that tower over small things.
Those restaurant challenges where like, can you eat the massive pizza or the massive steak? And now it's all going to be in temples of Balumdar. It's going to be, that's how I'm going to do it as a GM.
Nice. And shout out to the avatar form, the ranged attack, overbearing pressure. Your hugeness is such a factor that it distorts physical reality. That's how I'm imagining it.
You just sort of like Balumdar just sort of furrows his brow at someone and they take bludgeoning damage.
Like, I think it's a tie between this and Great Mother Spider for my next religious focused character. They're both amazing for their own reasons.
So Nate, I don't think we got to your favorite.
It was he was massive.
Okay,
I mean, admittedly, it's because like just kind of memes and silliness, but the fact that there's
so basic and
it's so ridiculous as a concept that like
no, I love it because like a lot of times when we look at pantheons, there were like what was important to people is important, and this is important. This like making big things is important to us as a people even today. So of course there should be a deity to big.
I kind of want to make a character who just becomes as large as possible, and that's the best part. Like a lot of fun is sometimes making religious characters who aren't clerics because they can otherwise embody it. I mean, like Aurori, monks, etc.
Just giant like, form barbarian.
Yeah, oh, that's perfect. That is perfect. Okay, I need to make that.
A summoner who's trying to summon the biggest deity.
Yes, the biggest eidolon. Ooh.
And you can make him a Konrasu. You can take that option that you can be big, and even though you have the option to be small, you never take it.
No, that's heresy. That sounds
it is anathema to dismiss your enlarged form.
No, it's their fault for not making the building big enough. Don't worry, I have enough strength. I'll make the building big enough.
Oh yeah, here we go. Use magic to assume a form smaller than you are. Yeah, that's literally anathema. Makes sense. All right, are we ready to move on to the bestiary?
I think we have to. This episode is...
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes, and there's about 15 creatures in here. So, once again, Michelle, you've contributed to the bestiary, so how about we jump to your entries, the Kanona?
Yeah, I will try not to spend too long talking about them. Yeah, the Kanona...
Spend all the time.
The Kanona is the half person split down the middle. It's based on certain West African folklore. I had to pull from a lot of different sources because there are a lot of different versions of, I think it's called the Hai Uri or Hai Kuri or something along those lines. But it's essentially just a creature from the underworld who comes up and is half of a person in like every possible way. When they speak, you only hear half of the words that they say, and when you speak, they only hear half of what you say. And their favorite meal is people, and they eat half of the person. So it's a weird, creepy thing. And I didn't want to just like pull directly from the myth. I just sort of wanted to create what the Galarian version of it would be. So of course it's an aberration. Of course it is. It's a level 8 creature, so like it's kind of scary. And then it loves shiny things, so you can sort of bribe it to not eat you. And it even mentions like the DC of the will save to not eat you is based on the value of the thing you give it.
Nice.
Yeah, so if it's 50 GP, it's a DC 20 will save. If you give them a gift worth 100, it becomes a DC 25. So, how much is it worth to you to not get in this fight?
How much is half of you worth?
It's brilliant too because every adventure has like these art objects that you find in the treasure that is just like gold, but they would be so useful to get you through a Kanona encounter. That would be I love that hook.
Yeah. What I especially love about the Kanona, and I feel this way about a lot of the creatures in here. I have gone on the record to say the Groot slang is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's horrible. What I love about like doing like African inspired creatures is that it's a lot of stuff that people aren't familiar with, and I think familiarity sort of leads to perhaps not boredom, but like mundanity. Where like if you look at a beholder on paper, it's a giant eyeball with a giant mouth and a bunch of little eyeballs that shoot lasers that have random magical effects. That sounds terrifying, but if you tell a RPG group, you're fighting a beholder. They're like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. We know about these. So I really wanted to emphasize, like, no, this is not something that you know about. This is something else.
Absolutely. Like, just imagining half of a person coming at you at a dead sprint. That, what? That's kind of inherently terrifying because you don't understand what you're seeing.
I really appreciate that first sentence because, when you're flipping through the page, the art will tend to be the first thing that strikes you. I just kind of assumed this was a creature materializing and we'd only seen half of it. So when I got to the description and it's like, Kanona are half human and only half in the most literal sense, it made me re-examine the art and be like, oh, that's the whole monster.
Yeah, I got a little whimsical with the description. I was trying to like sort of emulate like a folktale. Like this is like something that your grandmother would sort of tell you, like a scary story to get you not to get out of bed.
Well, I think if you'd said like, oh, it's a bisecting mobile creature, it's like that wouldn't have the same punch as like really speaking in really like more personal terms. So good choice.
Yeah.
It's a giant nope.
So the other creature that I wrote is Ca Goluo. Ca is a Baole word that means grandfather. Ca Goluo is an ancestral spirit. It is the name of this unique creature. And I made the choice to give it the unique rarity tag because I was thinking like, I don't think an ancestral spirit should be something you can just like run up on. Like this is obviously something like special and something different. And I wanted to emphasize like, this is not a monster to fight. This is like a guardian spirit that has existed like before your ancestors. Like this is like, it is, people refer to it as a relative. And when it shows up, it's big. So it's a level 14 creature. It's a beast spirit, and it has a lot of abilities, but two main ones that were important is the rejuvenation, which is if you manage to defeat it, it will come back. It will keep coming back until every person of Mwangi descent rejects belief in it. So as long as there is like a single person who is like, I want my grandpa to protect me, he will keep coming back. And then he also has the ability to appear anywhere on the material plane when someone calls out for help. And when he appears, he heals every ally within 30 feet of the space he appears for 8d8 hit points. He heals every ally within 60 feet. And then every ally who he heals gets a +2 bonus to saving throws for 1 minute. So he's kind of like a Deus Ex Machina. He is kind of like, your party is about to get TPK'd. He's going to show up and heal everybody and do a big attack. And like, I kind of wrote him that way intentionally because he's meant to be a guardian. He's meant to be a protector. That also means that if your party, if your PCs are like on the wrong side, if they're attacking someone they shouldn't be attacking, they might get gored by a giant spirit bull.
I love those two abilities paired up as well because this is a fantastic adventure hook. If the villain is somebody that's trying to make sure CA Ghoul doesn't come back, and then the only way to accomplish that is to do some terrible stuff that needs to be stopped.
Yeah, I do like it when there's an ability that may not necessarily show up in your average fight. I doubt your average day-to-day encounter is going to involve getting the entirety of the Mwangi to disbelieve in someone. But the fact that it just tells you what this spirit is about, like if people believe in it, it will continue to come back. Oh, that's good to know. That'll tell me exactly like its relation to the people, its spiritual, dare I say, connection. It's nice.
So, Michelle, I'd like you to reflect on the fact that this creature made it into the bestiary, because we've only got about 15 creatures in the entire bestiary in this book. Most of them are the kind of creatures that you will fight against. And so for this spiritual and story-based creature to make the cut, why do you think this was such an important creature to include in the Mwangi Expanse?
So I'll say, I don't know if this is what they intended for me to do, because like when I got the outline, it was just sort of like, this creature is a bull, it's a guardian, it's based loosely on this Ivory Coast folklore. And as I'm looking more and more into this folklore, I see that in certain parts of the Ivory Coast, they would wear these masks and do these this dance that represents different members of their family throughout generations, and the bull is the mask that represents the father. And it has all of this huge personal significance, and it's all about your family ties, and there's much more to it than I can really explain properly. But the more research I did, I was like, this can't just be a thing to fight. This can't just be a monster that you punch in the face and move on with. This has to, especially considering what this book is and what it's about, and the ties to history, and for me, it's a tie to a history that I don't even really have a relationship with, that I don't even really know. I felt it was very important in that moment to make this creature someone of significance, not even something, someone, because I felt like it had to be that way.
I think that's a very nice note to end on. So before we move on to wrap up the episode, I'd like to give you both an opportunity to let people know where they can find out more about you, and if they want to get in touch with you, follow you on social media, things like that. Nate, why don't we start with you?
Cool. You can find me on Twitter at Roskman, Roskman. It's the same one I'm using in chat right now. I mostly just retweet pixel art, but I occasionally do big thinks about tabletop RPGs, and I've been considering working on a few interesting projects for the future, as soon as I finish a NDA thing I'm working on right now. Other than that, yes, shout out to Paizo for finally releasing a nice biomorphic sounding class. I've been teased with that forever in Starfinder. I love the biohacker, but the name sold me on some monstrosity. But we got a cool chemist, and the nanocyte was this close.
They should have called it the cool chemist.
Just a biotech nanocyte now would have been good, but this would be good.
Excellent. And Michelle?
I am on Twitter at Alesha Kills. That is ALESHAKILLS. Got a lot of stuff coming up. Strength of the Thousands. I wrote book 3.
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
The Hurricanes Howl, that's coming out August, I believe. Bunch more stuff that you're going to see announcements for in the future that, just keep an eye out for. It's going to be very cool is all I can say.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Maybe we'll have you on in the near future.
We'll see. We wrote this book last year, so we'll see.
All right, excellent. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on here. This the fact that we got 2 really long interviews out of the Mwangi Expanse is just so indicative of how good this book is. I know we were a little more indulgent in this episode than we were in last one, but honestly, we skipped most of the bestiary. We skipped most of the religion. There is a lot to this book. I know I started the episode kind of saying that people are critiquing it, that it doesn't have as much crunch. I think it's because it's twice the size of what people were expecting this book to be. and yet it is still loaded with the same amount of crunch we normally get in the Lost Omens hardcover. Anyway, on that note, we're going to be wrapping things up. So once again, thank you both for joining us, and we hope to see you both in the future. And
thank you.
Param, we will be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shoutouts.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 254 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, we want to bring your attention to some things that we want to shout out to. But first, we've been doing these like news/shout-out segments when we get to the end of an episode, and we've only got a little bit of news, and we don't have a lot of time. So, Param, What is the big news that we definitely have to cover in this episode?
So there has been finally some reductions to the requirements to the ancestries for PF2 Society. If you do know that this was an issue that was near and dear to my heart, and we're finally seeing some of the what they have said before, that we would see some ease on some of the requirements to get to play some of these very exciting ancestries. So to start off with, it's less of a crash, but the hobgoblins and the catfolk used to be limited to you could only get these once ever, and now they are buyable as much as you want. Like, they were extra restricted, and now they're just normally restricted. But most excitingly for most of the players, Leshy, no requirement. It's just anybody can be a Leshy as long as you've got the book. Yay, Leshy! I know a lot of fans are going to be super happy about that. And then we're going to end things off with another favorite, Lizard Folk, have gone from 80 points to 40 points, which I think if there is a buy-in cost, 40 points is more than reasonable to buy into. That's a con, playing a few games at a con in a row where you'll get the con bonus, because you get extra points if you play during a convention. Will net you enough to get a Lizard Folk, and that's where I think, honestly, that's about where I would hope that most ancestries would be at that 40 point range. But yeah, so Lizard Folk's 40 points, Leshy's free, and Catfolk and Hobgoblins no longer extra secret double probation.
I wonder if this is kind of a testing the water to see if this doesn't throw off the economy of this point system that they had developed for Pathfinder Society that, we have been critical of in the past.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, those same points are spent to get your other bonuses, such as resurrections and character retrievals and other important things. So, like, you need these for more than one thing. So it's even with that revelation after the point system debuted, which I didn't know during my initial rant, that makes them even more precious, those points are. And so I do want to see them relax. So I hope that this is testing the waters. I hope we continue to see more and more of these ancestries become available. Especially with Mwangi, we just talked about some fantastic ancestries. They are rare, so I understand those getting restricted. The rare ones I do understand restrictions on, because they want to make these rare in the setting. But the uncommon and lesser, I would have preferred to have less or no restrictions on. But I hope that they become accessible, especially with how exciting they are, how unique many of them are. There's nothing like a Conrasu in Pathfinder, and I'm sure there's a ton of players that will want to do it. And if it's priced, impossibly out of reach, then it's a shame.
Well, and also, the Mwangi Expanse is different from the Ancestry Guide. You might be picking this up specifically because you are intrigued by the ancestries, the ancestries rather. But there's a whole lot more to the book than that. But the fact that the Ancestry Guide, none of the ancestors were available, basically none of the content were, and it is a crunch book, even if it's a Lost Moments book, that really felt like, oh, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to see more of this. This is definitely good news from what we are seeing. Oh, if you did buy any of the ancestries if you did spend points on them, you now get a boon that gives you a bonus while playing that character.
That's pretty cool. Oh, I didn't pick up on that. That's awesome.
They did that before in PF1. If you like used a boon to make back when you had to have a boon to make a Kitsune or an Azamar, and then they became everybody. Those who had the boons got bonuses.
Nice. So I want to go to a couple of shoutouts. I actually forgot to write my shoutouts for this episode, so I'm just going to do a couple of network shoutouts, then call it an episode. First of all, I want to shout out to the Troubles in Otari. We've been running Troubles in Otari as an actual play. Just part 1, it is a 3-part module, and each part is a standalone adventure that are linked. So we are running part 1. Jason Keeley is the one that is running it for us. Param and I are both players in that game, as are Dustin and Alex and Jess from the network. And I just posted episode 3, which means we only have 2 or 3 more episodes to go. I really like the dynamic of this group. I know that this was meant to be a one-shot and just like one and done, and who knows what we'll ever do with these characters again. But revisiting these characters that we played about a month ago, whenever I'm editing it, it's like, it's not just like, I like my character or I like this adventure. It's like, I love this group. What an interesting dynamic we've created.
It was so much fun, and I was worried a little bit going in with the group we brought together because they're very different play styles. Like how you play, how I play, how Alex plays, very different play styles. And so, but to see that it meshed so well together was a surprise and joy.
Yeah, the other thing is because it really was 2 parties. There was me and Jess that developed a backstory where I'm like the businessman and she's my assistant, with like, every time she says, yes, sir, there's something more going on underneath the surface that I'm kind of oblivious to. And then there's you, the necromancer, and your 2 Kitsune students. And there really was not a lot of crossover. And yet, like, you and I, as both like kind of the mentors in the relationships, we mesh really well together. And then that's created an interesting dynamic for how the characters that are related to our 2 central characters, I don't want to say central characters, but like, we're kind of like the bridge between the 2 different groups. And it's fun and it's fascinating. And it's a fun, light adventure. Jason is a really fun GM. I've said fun about a million times talking about it. Yeah. So I hope I've really gotten over the point that Troubles in Otari, our actual play, is really fun.
Yeah. I also love that neither of our characters are actually good mentors.
No.
It's like they might get killed, and I'm like, so
let's kind of see how this plays out. All right, and the other thing I'm going to shout out to, I'm actually going to shout out to my article from yesterday. It's Behind the Screens, which is my GM focused one, and it's called about sympathetic enemies and game lethality. So kind of like when we touched on when we were talking about the gnomes and that episode that you did with Chris Sims last Monday. There's definitely a push against just casting certain ancestors, casting certain species as purely evil creatures, especially if it's like, it's not an outsider, if it's a terrestrial creature that has societies and that, has histories and would have motivation for what for why they might be attacking the party. As we were making them more sympathetic, it's kind of like, but the game still is a very lethal game. There's the murder hobo meme. There's the fact that you take a penalty if you don't want to kill something or deal damage that would kill something. And so I just wrote up an article giving GMs some tips that it's like, if step 1 is let's make sure these characters add more depth and make them more complex and interesting. If step 2 is the player saying, I don't want to just kill everybody because they might have complex motivations, they might be interesting characters with interesting backstories, then we have to address just the default setting of the game of you kill your enemies. And so I've introduced some different ways that you can address it in flavor, like as campaign options. And then I also threw in a couple of mechanical options for making less lethal games. Specifically, the ones that I really enjoyed were the portable prison, because you don't want to be walking around with a gang of your defeated foes all tied together as you go deeper and deeper into the dungeon. So there was the, what did I call it? This is a much longer article than I remembered. There we go. The bag of holding cells. Whereas instead of amount of bulk, it's the amount of unconscious bodies you can put in there. And the Facebook, which is a book where it looks like it's wanted posters, but that actually is like an imprint of the soul of the person who you are carrying out in your book. And when you get to, the proper authorities, then you can take them out of the book and it becomes a blank book again. And then the charm bracers was something similar. They're handcuffs, and every time you handcuff somebody to it, the person becomes a charm dangling off the chain of the handcuffs. So I thought it was clever. I thought it was an apt article. And honestly, I expected it to get more of a reaction than it did. It just kind of got its a typical amount of likes. So if you haven't had a chance to read it over, I would appreciate the feedback. I'd appreciate a couple more eyes on the articles. I actually, Param, I quote 5th edition and even suggest retrofitting one of its rules. And that is a first for me.
Yay! So, I like it, and I appreciated this article because in role-playing games, if you read any good genre fiction, the concept of taking a life is supposed to be a difficult choice and hard. I mean, even in soldiers goes through traumatic, horrific psychological damage because they have to do that in a war-like situation. These casual adventurers, frolicking through the dungeon, dealing out death doesn't work. It doesn't really work.
So I hope to address things about it that don't work and hopefully make it work a little easier in people's games. All right, Param, I think we're about to wrap things up, at least for the official episode, but where are we going now?
Well, every episode of No Direction is followed up with the Private Sanctum After Party, where if you are a patron at the $5 level or above at patreon.com/No Direction, you can join us on our Discord server, where we will have an episode just for you about whatever you want us to talk about right after this episode.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.